The Vorak had never expected this moment to come. Their hope had always been that their advanced technology and peaceful nature would shield them from the violent tides of the galaxy. But now the Tsarian Dominion had turned their eyes toward them. The Tsarians were an empire known for their ruthlessness and their desire for expansion. They saw no value in the Vorak, beyond what they could take from them. And the Vorak knew they were doomed. The Tsarians had already crushed most of their fleet, and their capital was now surrounded by a wall of enemy ships. The Vorak knew that the situation was dire, but they still had one card left to play. The distress signal was their last hope. They had heard rumors of an ancient alliance that spanned the galaxy back. When the stars were young, they didn't believe in it anymore. But now there was no other choice. They had to believe someone would come to their aid. They had to believe that somewhere in the vastness of the universe, there was still someone who could help them. The signal was sent into the void, a silent plea for help that would travel across light years of space, reaching out like a hand in the dark. The Vorak sent it in every direction, hoping against hope that there was still someone out there who would respond. The message was simple and direct. We are the Vorak. We are in desperate need of assistance. The Tsarian Dominion has attacked our systems, and we are unable to defend ourselves. Please, if anyone can hear this, assist us before it is too late. They did not know who would answer it. Perhaps an old ally, a distant neighbor, perhaps even another species that had nothing to gain, but shared their values of peace. But they could not have known that their message would reach the farthest corner of the galaxy and land in the hands of a species so different from their own that their understanding of what was about to unfold was nothing more than a distant dream. The humans had long since been a curiosity to the rest of the galaxy. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. Their society was young, their planet still scared by the last remnants of its violent history, and yet something about them had captured the attention of the galaxy's more powerful species. The humans had survived their brutal homeworld, a place where life was a constant battle, and only the strongest lived to see another day. Their reputation as survivors had spread like wildfire across the stars, but it was not the human survival instincts that made them such a mystery to the galaxy. It was their willingness to fight when others would surrender, their unyielding determination to never give up even in the face of insurmountable odds, and the strange idea that they fought not for power or conquest, but for the thrill of the challenge. It was this that intrigued those who had watched them from afar. But no one had truly understood what it meant to be human until the distress signal reached them. When the signal arrived at Earth, it was met with little fanfare. Humanity had long since learned to deal with alien contact, even if they weren't always certain what to expect when dealing with those from beyond their star system. They had fought wars on their homeworld long before their first contact with the stars. They had faced extinction before and survived. And so when the distress signal reached their military commanders, they did not hesitate. They understood what was required of them. They knew that it was time to respond in the only way humanity knew how. They would not send peacekeepers. They would not offer negotiations. No, their response would be simple and effective. The galaxy would soon understand the meaning of human intervention. When the distress signal reached Earth, it didn't arrive as a faint whisper or a fleeting curiosity. It came as a sharp cry for help, echoing across the vast emptiness of space. To be picked up by the most unlikely of listeners, the humans on Earth had always been aware of their place in the universe, but they had never felt as insignificant as they did in the early days of space exploration. The stars were distant, the galaxy was vast, and their tiny planet seemed a speck lost in the grandeur of it all. But time had changed them. Earth had survived the Cold War, had faced down the threat of extinction from within and beyond their world. They had learned to fight and adapt to anything the universe could throw at them. And in doing so they had become something else entirely, something that the galaxy had yet to reckon with. Earth's response to the distress signal was swift, and without hesitation. Humanity did not waste time debating or weighing options. They had seen their own world almost destroyed by forces beyond their control, and they had rebuilt from the ashes. It had not been easy. It had required sacrifice and determination, but above all it had required strength. The Vorak had sent their plea for help to the wrong species, But no one could blame them for their ignorance. They had no way of knowing that humanity was not a species to send emissaries or diplomats. They were not the peaceful negotiators or cautious explorers they had once been. Now they were survivors and warriors built from the lessons of millennia of strife. Their leaders had no doubt that the Forec needed help, but they also understood that help from humanity would not be the kind they might expect. The Forec's call had not been heard by diplomats or peacemakers. It had reached the most powerful military force in human history, and that force would come not with diplomacy, but with overwhelming strength. The first step was to assemble a fleet. Earth had never seen anything like it. The shipyards were already bustling with activity as humanity's greatest minds worked together to create an armada unlike any the galaxy had ever known. It wasn't just the sheer number of ships that made this fleet unique, it was the ships themselves. They were a reflection of humanity's very nature, designed not to outmaneuver, but to outblast, to endure, and to strike with force that would leave no question of who had the upper hand. Each ship was built to survive the harshest environments, to adapt to the needs of the moment, and to unleash destruction in ways that no alien species could predict. Earth's engineers and military tacticians had drawn on every lesson learned from the brutality of their own history, from the world wars to the modern conflicts that had shaped their nation-states and societies. The fleet would be a living testament to humanity's resilience. As the fleet took shape, humans from all corners of Earth gathered, their most skilled pilots and soldiers preparing themselves for a mission they understood well. War was not something they took lightly, but neither was it something they feared. The Deathworlder Armada would not be composed of just soldiers and tacticians. It would be composed of survivors, of warriors who had faced impossible odds and still lived to tell the tale. The fleet would be led by the greatest minds of Earth's military leaders, but it would be carried out by the sheer willpower of the men and women who would fight to the last to protect their own and to show the galaxy what humanity truly was. The fleet was finally ready. The ships, now fully equipped, began to take their positions in orbit around Earth in a formation that seemed more like a gathering of beasts preparing for the hunt than a military exercise. The world's leaders watched as their ships prepared to leave their atmosphere and head toward the distant stars where the Forec awaited. But there was something else that stirred in the air among the people, a quiet anticipation. The galaxy would soon know what humanity was capable of, and it would never forget the day the Deathworlder Armada was unleashed. The day the Deathworlder Armada set sail was a momentous one for Earth, but it went largely unnoticed in the wider galaxy. In the Forec home system, the desperate plea for help still echoed faintly, unaware of what was coming for them. Humanity had been underestimated. No one truly understood how far they had come or what they had endured. But now, they were about to show the universe that they were no longer the children of Earth, struggling to survive on their own planet. No, humanity had transformed into a force capable of reshaping the very galaxy itself. The Deathworlder Armada, now fully assembled, began its journey toward the Forec system. It was not a swift or sleek fleet. No, it was something far more imposing. Each ship in the fleet was a fortress, designed for durability, power, and sheer survival. The ships were armed to the teeth with weapons that could burn through entire fleets with a single blast, yet they were built to endure as well, capable of withstanding punishment that would tear apart lesser ships. It wasn't just about firepower. It was about making sure nothing could stand in their way. At the heart of this fleet were the warships, massive in size, bristling with weaponry. Their hulls were constructed of the strongest alloys Earth could produce, their engines capable of withstanding the stress of the long journey. These were ships built for war, nothing more, nothing less. But alongside them were the transport vessels, converted from civilian ships, their peaceful purpose now lost to the horrors of intergalactic conflict. These ships were not designed for combat, yet the humans had converted them into effective war machines, outfitting them with defensive shielding and heavy weaponry. The fleet was a reflection of humanity's nature, adaptive, resourceful, and relentless. The leadership of the fleet was composed of the finest commanders and tacticians Earth had to offer, but what truly made this force different was the soldiers themselves. Humans were born from a planet where survival was a constant battle. They had learned to fight for everything they had, to adapt to every situation, to never back down in the face of adversity. In the Deathworlder Armada, there were no conscripts or reluctant soldiers. Everyone was a volunteer, driven by the same instinct, survival, and a deep-seated need to protect their own. As the fleet moved through space toward the 4X system, the humans began to prepare for what lay ahead. They were not naive. They knew that they would face resistance. They knew that the Tsarian Dominion would not sit idly by and let them make their mark on the galaxy. The Tsarians were as ruthless as they were powerful, and they would not take kindly to the interference of a species they had long considered beneath them. But humanity's approach was simple: engage and destroy. They didn't need to negotiate or talk. They had been honed by the harshest environment imaginable, and they understood the most fundamental rule of life in the galaxy: the strongest survive. The humans' fleet entered hyperspace, cutting through the stars toward the 4X system. The passage through hyperspace was smooth, but every crew member on every ship knew the battle ahead would not be. The 4X, they knew, had already suffered greatly at the hands of the Tsarians, and they had no illusions about the scale of the threat they were about to face. But humanity was not there to ask questions. They were there to offer only one thing: a solution to the 4X problems, and they would do it their way. The 4X had no way of knowing what was coming for them. Their message had been heard, but it had reached the wrong kind of help. Their hope had been for peacekeepers, for diplomats, for anything that could stave off the violence that threatened to consume them. Instead, they would receive something they had never expected: the Deathworlder Armada, a relentless force of nature, bearing down on their world like an unstoppable storm. The galaxy would soon witness just how far humanity had come, and the 4X would be the first to feel the true weight of humanity's wrath. As the fleet prepared to emerge from hyperspace, a quiet tension filled the air. Humanity was not here to negotiate, to assist, or to extend an olive branch. They were here to make sure the 4X knew the cost of their distress signal, and that lesson would not be an easy one. The Deathworlder Armada was on the move, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The 4X had spent countless hours poring over the distress signal they had sent, hoping and praying that someone, anyone, would respond in time to save them. Their hearts had lifted as the first sign of hope arrived: a response from distant stars, an acknowledgement that their cry had been heard. But nothing could have prepared them for the true nature of the help that was coming. They had hoped for an ally who would bring diplomacy, negotiation, and perhaps a path to peace. Instead, what awaited them was something far darker, more powerful, and far beyond their understanding. As the Deathworlder Armada emerged from hyperspace and entered the 4X system, the first sight the 4X had of the fleet was nothing short of terrifying. It was not a single ship or a small task force. It was an entire armada, a vast sea of warships, their massive forms looming like mountains in the cold expanse of space. Their sheer size and number were overwhelming, and the 4X had never seen anything like it. The humans had arrived, not as friends or allies, but as an unstoppable force, intent on reshaping the very fate of the 4X race. The 4X commanders were caught off guard, scrambling to interpret what they were witnessing. The fleet was unlike any other they had encountered. It wasn't just the raw size of the ships or their advanced weaponry. It was the energy that radiated from them, an almost palpable sense of purpose and fury. These were not vessels of negotiation, nor were they here to defend or provide aid. The humans had come for one reason, and one reason only: to impose their will upon the galaxy. For the 4X, the realization was a crushing blow. They had underestimated humanity, assuming that they were merely a young, primitive species struggling to make their way in the vast galaxy. But now, they saw the truth. Humanity was a Deathworlder species, born from a brutal planet where survival was not a given, but a constant battle. The 4X had not just called for help, they had unwittingly summoned a storm. The first battle between the 4X and the human fleet unfolded with terrifying speed. The Orcs' defense fleet, still battered and exhausted from their previous encounters with the Tsarian forces, was ill-equipped to deal with the overwhelming might of the Deathworlder Armada. The humans didn't hesitate. The first volley of fire from the human warships tore through the Orc defense lines with terrifying precision. Their advanced weaponry, lasers, plasma cannons, and railguns struck like thunderbolts, ripping through the fragile Orc ships as if they were made of paper. The Orc tried to respond, launching counterattacks with all the strength they could muster, but it was futile. The humans did not need to outnumber them. They only needed to be stronger. On the bridge of the flagship, the Orc fleet admiral watched in stunned silence as his forces were systematically torn apart. His communications officers scrambled to send distress signals, but there was no time for a second plea for help. The humans had arrived, and they were not interested in negotiation. They were here to crush any resistance that stood in their path. Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship, Captain Mara Daniels stood at the helm, watching the unfolding battle with a cold, focused gaze. The humans had trained for this. They had prepared for years to wage war with a singular, unwavering goal: survival. Every ship, every crew member was built for this moment. The Orc had hoped for a savior. But the Deathworlder Armada wasn't here to save them. They were here to ensure the Orc learned what it meant to cross paths with humanity. With each passing minute, the Orc fleet began to crumble under the weight of the human assault. Their ships, once considered advanced and mighty, were no match for the sheer ferocity of the Deathworlders' weapons and tactics. The humans did not give them a chance to regroup or plan. They fought with a single-minded intensity, forcing the Orc into a retreat they were ill prepared for. As the battle raged on, the realization began to sink in. The Orc had not called for a savior. They had called upon their own undoing. The Deathworlder Armada was not here to help them. They were here to show the galaxy exactly who humanity was, and it was something that no one, not even the most advanced alien species, could have predicted. The battle between the Deathworlder Armada and the Orc forces escalated rapidly. The space around their homeworld, now a vast battlefield littered with the wreckage of what had once been a proud fleet. The Orc, having underestimated the sheer force and determination of humanity, were now fighting for their very survival, their ships crumbling beneath the unrelenting barrage of human firepower. It had been mere hours since the first shots had been fired, and already the Orc knew they were losing, but they could not fathom just how thoroughly their world would be reshaped by the time it was all over. For the Orc leadership, this was a nightmare. They had thought they had a chance to survive, to outlast the Tsarians, to perhaps even find some way to negotiate their way out of their plight. But the humans had not come to negotiate. They had come to dominate. And the Orc, despite all their advanced technology and knowledge of the stars, had no way to counter the ferocity and relentlessness of the human assault. On the human side, there was no mercy. The Deathworlder Armada did not know mercy, for it had not been a concept in their understanding of war. Their people had evolved on a planet where survival meant everything, and every fight was a matter of life or death. For the humans, this was more than just a military campaign. It was a statement. It was a reminder to the galaxy that the species that had once been thought of as weak, as primitive, had grown into something far more dangerous. The galaxy would know them now, and it would remember the name of humanity for centuries to come. Captain Mara Daniels stood on the bridge of the flagship, observing the destruction below with a calm and focused demeanor. The battle was far from over, but every second felt like a victory. Each blast of human firepower that tore through a Orc ship brought them closer to their ultimate goal, securing their position in the galaxy and making it clear to anyone who dared question humanity's place among the stars that they would never be easily conquered. The Orc tried to regroup, their command ships ordering tactical retreats, but it was too late. The human forces were relentless. Every move the Orc made to attempt an organized defense was countered by a swift and brutal response from the humans. The human fleet, despite being vastly outnumbered in terms of technological sophistication, fought with an intensity that left the Forec commanders stunned. The Deathworlders were not here to preserve their own strength. They were here to dismantle everything in their path. Back on the Forec homeworld, the citizens watched in horror as their once protected skies were torn apart. From the surface, they saw the ships falling from orbit, pieces of the great defense fleets crashing into the planet. The shock waves from the bombardment rippled across the surface, sending debris and dust into the atmosphere. The Forec had long lived in peace, and now their world was being consumed by war. War brought to them by a species they had never truly understood. As the Forec leaders scrambled to assess the situation, they realized the scope of their mistake. The humans were not merely a military threat. They were a force of nature. The Forec had called for help, expecting an ally, and instead they had awakened a beast, a creature born of survival and unyielding will, one that would not stop until its enemies were destroyed. The humans did not slow their assault. The next wave of attacks came in the form of ground assaults, with specialized landing craft descending to the Forec cities. These were not invasions in the traditional sense. The humans had no interest in occupying the planet or negotiating with its leaders. The goal was simple: dismantle the Forec's ability to resist, and to show the galaxy that humanity would never bow to anyone. The Tsarian forces, still watching from the shadows, were beginning to comprehend the magnitude of what was unfolding. They had been planning to strike at the Forec, but now they were faced with the realization that the humans had arrived not to aid the Forec, but to rewrite the balance of power in the galaxy. The Tsarians were far from fools, and they knew that the Deathworlder Armada would soon turn its attention to them. And when that moment came, they would not be able to stop it. In the Forec home system, the final blow was delivered swiftly and decisively. The Forec homeworld, once a beacon of peace and civilization, was now a broken shell. The Deathworlder Armada, without a second thought, had reduced their defenses to ash. The galaxy would never forget this day, the day the Forec learned what it meant to call for help from humanity. The humans had come, and they had shown the galaxy exactly what they were capable of. The Forec would never forget that mistake, and neither would the rest of the galaxy. Far from the burning remains of the Forec homeworld, in the heart of the Tsarian Dominion, the first signs of alarm began to spread like wildfire. The Tsarians, once certain that the Forec would fall swiftly and without significant interference, now found themselves facing an unimaginable reality. The Deathworlder Armada had arrived, and its devastation of the Forec was a clear message to anyone who had ears to listen. The galaxy was on the precipice of something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. The Tsarians, renowned for their ruthlessness and efficiency, could not ignore this threat. They had watched the humans from afar for years, dismissing them as a primitive species, not worthy of serious attention. Now that perception was shattered. Tsarian warlords convened in secret, their vast war fleets already preparing for the worst. They could not afford to underestimate the humans, not after what they had seen. The Tsarians had always been the dominant power in this part of the galaxy, but the Deathworlder Armada had demonstrated a shocking ferocity, a level of brutality and power that surpassed even their own. The question was no longer whether they could defeat the humans. It was whether they could even survive the storm that was coming. The Tsarian fleet commanders, seasoned warriors who had fought in countless battles, studied the human strategies with growing concern. They had always prided themselves on their military supremacy, but the humans had employed tactics that confounded them. The human fleet was not about technical superiority or overwhelming numbers. It was a perfect embodiment of a species that had learned to fight for survival against all odds. The Tsarians knew they would have to rethink everything they had learned about warfare if they were to stand a chance. The Tsarians had never encountered a species like the humans, ruthless in their aggression, skilled in tactics that favored endurance over elegance, and driven by an unyielding will to prevail. The humans didn't follow the conventional rules of warfare that the Tsarians had grown accustomed to. Their forces were a seamless blend of brute strength and intelligence, a calculated chaos that made it impossible to predict their moves. The Tsarians, proud of their long history of military dominance, suddenly found themselves on the back foot, scrambling to respond to a new kind of enemy, one that wasn't bound by any of the same principles they held dear. In the halls of the Tsarian High Command, a tense silence filled the air. The news from the Orcs system had arrived, and the full scale of the devastation became apparent. The once thriving Vorak world was now a hollow shell, its defenses obliterated, its cities reduced to rubble. The Tsarians had sent their fleets to capitalize on the Orcs' weakness, but the humans had already moved faster than they had anticipated. The Tsarians could not afford to wait any longer. As the Tsarian warlords discussed their options, a grim realization settled in. If they did not act soon, their own territory could be the next target. The Deathworlder Armada had demonstrated a ruthless efficiency in its actions, and they were not a species to hesitate once they set their sights on a target. The Tsarians had always been confident in their might, but the arrival of the humans had shifted the balance. If they did not strike first, they risked being overwhelmed. They could not afford the luxury of time. The order went out. The Tsarian fleet would mobilize and move toward the Orcs system, but they would not rush in blindly. The Tsarians had learned from the Orcs' mistakes. They would not make the same miscalculation. They would fight with calculated precision, leveraging every advantage they had: strategic positioning, overwhelming numbers, and their superior technology. But the humans had shown that they could turn the tide of battle with their sheer determination and adaptability. The Tsarians knew they would need more than just firepower to defeat this new threat. As the Tsarian fleet began to move into position, the galaxy held its breath. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of galactic power. The Vorak had been the first to fall, but they would not be the last. The humans had made their mark on the galaxy, and now the Tsarians would learn the hard way what it meant to stand against a species that knew only how to survive, how to fight, and how to conquer. The question was no longer whether humanity would conquer the galaxy. It was whether anyone could stop them. The Tsarian fleet, now fully mobilized, cut through the void with a terrifying precision. It was a formidable armada, unmatched in size and technological prowess, a collection of massive warships designed for nothing but total domination. Their ships were built for speed, firepower, and devastating shock tactics, and they had always relied on overwhelming their enemies through sheer force. But as the fleet moved toward the Orcs system, a creeping unease settled over the Tsarian commanders. They could not ignore the nagging question that had grown since the first reports came in from the Orcs: the humans. The Tsarians had watched them destroy the Orcs, and what had once seemed like a distant, almost laughable species had become a living nightmare. The reports from the Orcs had been clear. Humanity fought not just to win, but to annihilate, to leave no survivors, to wipe out any force that threatened them. Their ships had cut through the Orcs, defenses like a hot knife through butter. Their soldiers had fought with an intensity and bloodlust that defied the very nature of what the Tsarians had known about warfare. No, the humans were no longer a species to be underestimated. They were a force to be reckoned with. In the Tsarian command ship, High Warlord Xerath stared at the screen, his eyes narrowing as he watched the course of the Deathworlder Armada. The humans had not hesitated to strike the Orcs with brutal force, and now they were coming for the Tsarians. There was no turning back. The warlords knew that this would not be a battle fought with traditional strategies. The humans had shown they were unpredictable, ruthless, and, above all, adaptable. Xerath leaned forward, his claws tapping against the cold metal surface of his desk, deep in thought. He was a veteran of countless campaigns, a leader respected throughout the Tsarian dominion, but the humans had thrown everything he knew about warfare into chaos. He couldn't rely on conventional methods to destroy them. He needed to think outside the box, to outmaneuver them in ways that no one had anticipated. Meanwhile, across the vastness of space, Captain Mara Daniels stood on the bridge of the human flagship, staring at the vast expanse of stars ahead. The Tsarian fleet was drawing closer, and the time had come to face the full might of the Tsarians. Her fleet was ready, every ship prepared for the coming battle. But there was no illusion about what was to come. The humans had come to fight, to conquer, and to prove that their place in the galaxy was not just earned, but unavoidable. The Deathworlder Armada had been built for this moment, its warships designed to withstand the most vicious assaults and strike back with an overwhelming force. But it was not just their ships that made them a threat. It was the humans themselves. Their military was filled with the most hardened soldiers in the galaxy, men and women who had been shaped by centuries of conflict, who had been born on a world where survival was a constant struggle. They fought not because they had to, but because they wanted to, because the thrill of battle and the drive to survive were ingrained in them. Humanity's strategy was simple: overwhelm, adapt, and destroy. The Tsarians had their strength, but the humans had their ingenuity, their unpredictability, and their sheer determination to win at all costs. As the Tsarian fleet approached, Daniels felt a strange sense of calm. She knew what was about to unfold, and she knew that humanity would not back down. They had already faced down impossible odds and survived. This would be no different. As the two fleets came into contact, the battle began in earnest. The first wave of Tsarian ships fired upon the human fleet, massive beams of energy slicing through the dark void, exploding into the sides of human ships with blinding intensity. But the humans did not flinch. They returned fire with deadly accuracy, their weapons tearing into the Tsarian warships, hulls buckling and warping under the assault. Every ship in the human fleet was built to survive punishment, and they fought with a ferocity that shocked the Tsarians. The Tsarians, who had once thought their superior technology and firepower would be enough to crush the humans, quickly realized that their enemies were not going to break so easily. The humans adapted, responding to every Tsarian move with ruthless precision, finding weaknesses in the Tsarian formations and exploiting them with brutal efficiency. They knew no mercy, no hesitation. The battle raged, and as the Tsarian warlords watched in disbelief, they began to realize that their assumptions had been wrong. The humans were not just a threat. They were the inevitable storm that would sweep through the galaxy, reshaping it in their image. Captain Daniels watched as Tsarian ships exploded before her, the human fleet pressing forward relentlessly, pushing the Tsarians back in ways they had never experienced before. This was humanity's moment. And in the face of this unimaginable power, the Tsarians were beginning to understand that they had underestimated the wrong species. The battle between the Deathworlder Armada and the Tsarian fleet reached a fever pitch as the tide of war began to shift irrevocably in humanity's favor. The Tsarians, once the undisputed masters of the galaxy, were now finding themselves overwhelmed by the sheer ferocity and adaptability of their human adversaries. Every move they made, every strategy they attempted, seemed to be anticipated and countered with terrifying precision by the Deathworlders. It was a war unlike any the galaxy had seen before, a war of raw survival, where victory was not a choice but a necessity. On the bridge of the flagship, Captain Mara Daniels stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the unfolding chaos. The human fleet had suffered some losses, but their resilience was unparalleled. They were built to endure, to fight on against impossible odds. Each strike, each maneuver, was calculated with the cold precision of a species that had learned to adapt and survive in the harshest of conditions. The Tsarians had brought their greatest fleet to bear, but the humans had already proven that they were not the underdogs in this fight. They were the apex predators. Captain Daniels knew that the Tsarians would not stop easily. They were a proud, ancient race, and their leaders would not admit defeat without a final, desperate push. But humanity had already shown that they were not a species that could be pushed aside, that could be intimidated or broken. The Tsarians had underestimated them, and now that arrogance would be their undoing. The battle raged for hours, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The Tsarians, in their desperation, began to regroup, attempting to form a defensive line, but their efforts were futile. The human fleet had learned from every previous encounter, using tactics that the Tsarians could not predict. They focused on precision strikes, exploiting weaknesses in the Tsarian formation with surgical accuracy. The Tsarians had once relied on their superior numbers and technology, but now they found that their greatest strength was being turned against them. As the Tsarian lines began to falter, High Warlord Xerath knew that the end was near. He had watched his fleet crumble under the relentless assault of the humans, and the reality was inescapable. The Tsarians could not win this battle. They could not stop the Deathworlders, and they would not be able to turn the tide without risking everything. In a last-ditch effort, Xerath initiated a full-scale retreat, ordering his ships to fall back toward the safety of Tsarian-controlled space. It was a humiliating decision, but it was the only choice left. His fleet, once considered the most powerful in the galaxy, was in disarray. The humans had outsmarted them, outlasted them, and now they were paying the price for their overconfidence. The Tsarians had underestimated the humans' will to fight, their capacity for destruction, and their refusal to surrender. The Deathworlder Armada had proven that humanity was not a species that could be conquered. It was a species that could conquer. As the Tsarian fleet retreated into hyperspace, the human forces did not pursue. They did not need to. The message had been sent, loud and clear. The galaxy now understood that humanity was no longer a fledgling power. It was a dominant force, capable of reshaping the balance of power with one swift strike. Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. The Deathworlder Armada had achieved the impossible. They had defeated the Tsarians, crushed their most powerful fleet, and sent them fleeing from the battlefield. The Forek, still reeling from their own defeat, looked on with a mixture of awe and fear. The humans had come to their aid, but in doing so, they had revealed the true extent of their power, a power that had been forged on the blood-soaked battlefields of a deathworld. Humanity had shown the galaxy what they were capable of. They had not just survived. They had thrived. The Deathworlder Armada had delivered a message to every species in the galaxy. Humanity was no longer a mere curiosity, a race to be looked down upon. They were a force to be reckoned with. And as the Tsarian fleet limped away, nursing its wounds and licking its pride, the humans knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and they would not stop until they had made their mark on every corner of it. The age of humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again.